So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and waited at the door of Elisha's house. But Elisha sent a messenger out to him with this message: "Go and wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River. Then your skin will be restored, and you will be healed of your leprosy." But Naaman became angry and stalked away. "I thought he would certainly come out to meet me," he said. "I expected him to wave his hand over the leprosy and call on the name of the Lord his God and heal me. Aren't the rivers of Damascus, the Abana, and the Pharpar better than any of the rivers of Israel? Why shouldn't I wash in them and be healed?" So Naaman turned and went away in a rage. Kind of like this, we might think that, oh yeah, we'll do whatever as long as we know it's from God. But yet, when God doesn't come at us with what we expect, oftentimes, like Naaman here, we will get upset and not want to do what God says because it's not what we were expecting. What's up, cool people? My name's Matt. Welcome back to our Bible study. Apologies if audio levels aren't quite what they normally are. Apparently something happened with my microphone or my computer's most recent update, and the volume or sensitivity or whatever of the microphone got turned down a little bit. So, we are currently looking at 2 Kings chapter 5. There's been a lot about Elisha, actually. I mean, the first couple of chapters were actually Elijah's exit from his prophetic ministry and actually ascension to heaven, and then Elisha taking his place and doing really even more miraculous things than what we've read so far about Elijah. So and it seems like there's going to be even more in this chapter. But oh yeah, there's also a little bit of war going on with Israel and at least another nation, possibly multiple others. But yeah, let's hop right in, see what happens in chapter 5. The king of Aram had great admiration for Naaman, the commander of his army, because through him the Lord had given Aram great victories. But though Naaman was a mighty warrior, he suffered from leprosy. At this time, Aramean raiders had invaded the land of Israel, and among their captives was a young girl who had been given to Naaman's wife as a maid. One day the girl said to her mistress, "I wish my master would go to see the prophet in Samaria. He would heal him of his leprosy." Okay. So, actually, let me turn the music down a little more. So, this Naaman guy, good commander. It doesn't necessarily say much about his character as of yet, but he was the commander of a foreign army that apparently had some troops. I don't know if occupying is quite the right word, but had some troops in Israel at this moment. And this one young girl is actually the one who suggests that maybe he should go see. She says the prophet in Samaria, but I'm pretty sure that's assumed to be Elisha. Little note there at leprosy. Could say a contagious skin disease. Hebrew word used here and throughout this passage can describe various skin diseases. Okay. So it's not real specified what kind of skin disease that he actually had. Leprosy came up a bunch earlier in the Old Testament with a bunch of the laws on keeping things clean and whatnot. And yeah, it was... Leprosy, honestly, is a bit of a catch-all term for a lot of things. but usually some sort of disease, or, you know, something that causes typically skin, but occasionally other surfaces as well, to be like kind of discolored and or blotchy and all sorts of different things like that. Probably more specifically than that, the kind that could be contagious or spread in some way. So, not like some of the more genetic type skin discolorations that we might see. Anyway, so dude had leprosy, suggests he go see Elisha to be healed. And then we get to verse 4. So Naaman told the king what the young girl from Israel had said. Go and visit the prophet, the king of Aram told him. I will send a letter of introduction for you to take to the king of Israel. So Naaman started out, carrying as gifts 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter to the king of Israel said, With this letter I present my servant Naaman. I want you to heal him of his leprosy. Wording there could be a bit better, honestly. Like, specifying more so that, like, that, you know, he wants to see the prophet who would heal him of his leprosy. I guess I can understand taking the issue to the king of Israel first, though, just so it's out there front and center, totally clear that, yes, I am a foreign commander, but I am not here to do anything malicious. Note there at gold. Hebrew says 10 talents of silver and 6,000 shekels of gold. Although it has shekels in parentheses. Which makes me question a little bit whether it was supposed to be shekels. But 6,000 talents would be absolutely nuts. That's like almost, I think maybe somewhere possibly even in the realm of like amounts of gold that was used for, you know, parts of the temple in Jerusalem. But anyway, I digress. So, Naaman goes to the king, says, here's my business. I'm looking to be healed of this leprosy. Alright, verse 7. When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes in dismay and said, Am I God that I can give life and take it away? Why is this man asking me to heal someone with leprosy? I can see that he's just trying to pick a fight with me. But when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes in dismay, he sent this message to him. Why are you so upset? Send Naaman to me, and he will learn that there is a true prophet here in Israel. Yeah, again, like, why didn't the letter specify he wanted to see the prophet to be healed? It would have avoided this whole misunderstanding by the king of Israel, who might have been Joram at this time. That was the most recent one that I remember reading about. But yeah, it's like, no, you're not expecting the king himself to be the one to heal the guy. You want the prophet to do the healing. But the way the letter was worded, it wasn't stated like that. This is why it helps to be clear in your communication. Anywho. Alright, on to verse 9. So So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and waited at the door of Elisha's house. But Elisha sent a messenger out to him with this message: "Go and wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River. Then your skin will be restored, and you will be healed of your leprosy." But Naaman became angry and stalked away. "I thought he would certainly come out to meet me," he said. "I expected him to wave his hand over the leprosy and call on the name of the Lord his God and heal me. Aren't the rivers of Damascus, the Abana, and the Pharpar better than any of the rivers of Israel? Why shouldn't I wash in them and be healed?" So Naaman turned and went away in a rage. Yeah, the Jordan River was not known as the cleanest of rivers, especially based on this. But yeah, this is definitely not what Naaman expected. But this is what he got. So instead of, like, okay, related to this, isn't it interesting how kind of like this, like, we might think that, oh yeah, you know, we'll do whatever as long as we know it's from God. But yet, when God doesn't come at us with what we expect, oftentimes, like Naaman here, we will get upset and not want to do what God says because it's not what we were expecting. So, he's turning away from what he was told to do to be healed. And then we continue in verse 13. But his officers tried to reason with him and said, "Sir, if the prophet had told you to do something very difficult, wouldn't you have done it? So you should certainly obey him when he says simply, 'Go and wash and be cured.'" So Naaman went down to the Jordan River and dipped himself 7 times, as the man of God had instructed him. And his skin became as healthy as the skin of a young child, and he was healed. Then Naaman and his entire party went back to find the man of God. They stood before him, and Naaman said, "Now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel, so please accept a gift from your servant." But Elisha replied, "As surely as the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will not accept any gifts." And though Naaman urged him to take the gift, Elisha refused. Okay, so, eventually he gets convinced, as many of us probably do in situations where we similarly are like, well, this isn't how this is supposed to happen. What the heck? But then somebody else comes around and is like, okay, but if you were told to do this thing that's gonna be more difficult, and you knew that it was, you know, going to result in what you want, wouldn't you still do it? This is easy. So, at least give it a try. So, after that convincing, he goes to the Jordan River, and he's healed. Now, note there it's Sir. Hebrew says, "my father." But these are officers trying to reason with him. Unless one of the officers was his son. I don't know. Anyway. Then Naaman wants to give something to Elisha for the healing. But Elisha refuses. Probably, at least in part, because, I mean, that's not why he does this stuff. He doesn't do it for recognition. It's just because it's what God wants him to do. And the point of it is to glorify a God. So, I mean, Naaman has already acknowledged that, you know, he recognizes the power of the God Elisha serves. So, that's all Elisha really needs or wants from this. Alright, verse 17. Then Naaman said, "Alright, but please allow me to load 2 of my mules with earth from this place, and I will take it back home with me. From now on, I will never again offer burnt offerings or sacrifices to any other god except the Lord. However, may the Lord pardon me in this one thing. When my master the king goes into the temple of the god Rimmon to worship there and leans on my arm, may the Lord pardon me when I bow too." "Go in peace," Elisha said. So Naaman started home again. Okay. So Naaman is apparently, fully convinced of the power of the Lord, the God of Israel, and is wanting to only worship the Lord, but recognizes that, hey, because of his office and his standing with the king of Aram and the typical practices of the king of Aram, he's like, okay, look, I know the king's going to do this one thing, and it would be disrespectful and possibly dangerous for me to not bow in this situation. So, while I only want to worship the Lord, please, God forgive me when I do this. But otherwise, it seems like he's completely convinced that there are no other gods worthy of worship. So, sometimes it is the, big miraculous stuff that causes this to happen. Sometimes it is helping people when they're in need that directly leads to these kinds of things. So, lest you think that there's always a need to, add other things to what you do to help others, or, the things that you do to intentionally, give God glory. I mean, not always. Sometimes, maybe yes, but not always. Okay. Now we're looking at a different bit of story, or whatever you want to call it here. Moving on to a different topic, but still within the chapter, starting in verse 20. But Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said to himself, "My master should not have let this Aramean get away without accepting any of his gifts. As surely as the Lord lives, I will chase after him and get something from him." So Gehazi set off after Naaman. When Naaman saw Gehazi running after him, he climbed down from his chariot and went to meet him. "Is everything all right?" Naaman asked. "Yes," Gehazi said, "but my master has sent me to tell you that 2 young prophets from the hill country of Ephraim have just arrived. He would like 75 pounds of silver and 2 sets of clothing to give to them." Okay, so I'm guessing that's a lie. Because Gehazi here is saying to himself that, man, there was all this stuff. Elisha really should have taken some of it. I mean, it might have even been something, along the lines, or, in the general realm of, whenever the priests in the temple or the tabernacle or whatever, performed offerings, there were certain parts of those that were set aside for them to be their food, and but Elisha being a prophet, that's a different kind of thing, so it doesn't exactly work that way. I don't know, whatever his reasoning is, clearly Gehazi is kind of misguided. But he goes and asks for, says 75 pounds, which The Hebrew says a talent of silver and 2 sets of clothing. Now, I mean, that's not a whole lot out of what Naaman brought. I'm trying to scroll back up here to see where it says. So, that's like a tenth of the silver that was brought. But it's still 75 pounds, so, but still, like a tenth of the silver that was brought, and 2 of the 10 sets of clothing. It's not like he's asking for an absurd amount that would seem like, oh, yeah, no, this is completely... If there was this much you were gonna ask for, why not just ask for it at the start? But anyway, we'll carry on and see what else happens here. So he asks Naaman about, receiving these things, or giving them to Elisha. And then we get to verse 23. By all means, take twice as much silver, Naaman insisted. He gave him 2 sets of clothing, tied up the money in 2 bags, and sent 2 of his servants to carry the gifts for Gehazi. But when they arrived at the citadel, Gehazi took the gifts from the servants and sent the men back. Then he went and hid the gifts inside the house. If you gotta hide that stuff, not a good indicator that you're doing the right thing. But, I mean, this is a totally different situation from, like, you just wanted to surprise somebody with something. Because this is essentially taking stuff from someone that your parents or master or whoever didn't ask for. When Naaman says he says take 2 talents, which the Hebrew said 1 talent up here, so it's like, yeah, it's maybe not the same wording, but same meaning, essentially. And then when they got to the citadel, the note there says the Ophel, which I'm not totally sure what meaning might be attached to that name. That's one of those things where I'd have to be a little more of a scholar of the Bible to know the full significance of that. But anyway, point is, probably a little ways off from where Elisha lived, Gehazi sent Naaman's men back, probably so that it would look a little less suspicious were Elisha to see him. But still, then he hides the gifts inside the house. I'm going to air quote gifts. Naaman intended them as gifts. Gehazi's intentions weren't so pure. Anyway. Okay. Or, I don't know, maybe his overall intentions were pure, but he's, like I said before, maybe he was just kind of misguided in his thinking. I don't know. Let's just continue on with verse 25 here. When he went to his master, Elisha asked him, "Where have you been, Gehazi?" "I haven't been anywhere," he replied. But Elisha asked him, "Don't you realize that I was there in spirit when Naaman stepped down from his chariot to meet you? Is this the time to receive money and clothing, olive groves and vineyards, sheep and cattle, and male and female servants? Because you have done this, you and your descendants will suffer from Naaman's leprosy forever." When Gehazi left the room, he was covered with leprosy. His skin was white as snow. Now, pale skin is a thing. Being that white, though, not normal. So, ultimately, since Gehazi took from Naaman what Elisha, his master, had refused, now he's been cursed. like, when the man of God says to do something or not do something, it's a good idea to listen and not try to subvert that in any way. So, I guess even this whole bit, despite having a different, subsection heading, that was still kind of the same story, same chain of events. But, yeah, that's what we get for 2 Kings chapter 5. Alright, so Elisha helps Naaman, who is skeptical at first. Actually, Elisha didn't even help him that much, other than giving him the advice on what to do. Naaman was the one who didn't want to do it, but then got convinced to by his own crew. And then we had that whole thing with Gehazi. Like, you would think, spending that much time with somebody like Elisha, I don't want to read too much or assume too much about his motives, but you would think somebody who's helping a guy like Elisha wouldn't think that way, or would at least agree with what their master says. But whatever. In any case, that's the chapter in a nutshell. So, as always, like and share if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel to see new videos as I post them. Look down in the description for links to social media pages and all sorts of good stuff like that, like my Discord server where we can chat about stuff whenever. And I've got my supporter page linked down in there. You can, help me out a little bit financially, and if you sign up for a membership and do it that way, you'll get some little perks in exchange. But, yeah. Otherwise, have a look down below there. Leave some comments with any thoughts or questions you have. And I'll respond to them as quickly as I can, assuming, they're actual, reasonable discussion points or anything that I feel like actually needs replying to. Sometimes people are just like, hey, cool video. And I'm just like, yeah, thanks. I'll give the comment a like or whatever. But anyway. So yeah. That's going to do it for now. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you soon for another video. Whatever the case is, till next time, stay cool, people.